Podcast 106. Chris, I have a serious question for you.
Uh-oh.
Would you like some raw milk?
No. Raw milk is for the Amish.
So I'm very curious, just real quick, if anybody listening to this podcast enjoys raw milk, like literally right out of the tit of a cow into a glass jar, refrigerated, and you buy it from the refrigerator. Raw milk.
Mm.
I'm going to go with RFK here and make raw milk legal again in all 50 states,
Oh my.
as our buddy Ryan Nordahl would say if he's listening, because he owned or he's used to own or something, works on a dairy farm. We had him on the podcast once.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's
No, I
always on
don't.
there.
I don't necessarily like it, but
You
I
never
guess
even had it.
once you get past all the film and the gross
There's nothing in
garbage
it.
floating on top,
I just
uh,
had a nice glass this morning. It was in
it
this
I
glass
guess
right here.
it tastes about the same. I guess.
It tastes way better. Raw
Yeah.
milk.
Raw.
RFK.
Raw.
Raw. Yeah, raw. Real quick, too.
Oh no.
Since you had this comment on your podcast or your podcast video the other day on YouTube about the warm feed update,
Okay.
right?
Yep.
Remember
Yep.
that?
Yep. Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, I had a guy.
What
Actually,
what did he
yeah,
say?
yeah. He said any update on the warm feet episode. He was suffering and had very
Is it
cold
something?
feet, and he asked for help.
I know
And
the feeling, buddy.
I commented back and I said, well, not at this point, but Dave is talking to a fella in Alaska, and I'll let you explain the rest.
So I was talking to this guy in Alaska, and we were emailing back and forth, and he told me about these boots, and I have no history with these boots other than the company because when I was a kid, I used to use the same company when I used to go snowboarding, and then I do have a pair of this of hiking shoes, like low cut shoes that I use for hiking. They're very comfortable. So he recommended this brand of shoe. So me, because I buy stuff, just what's the saying?
Frivolously.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, right. So I bought these shoes, and I'm gonna put them to a test here soon. So I have no experience with these shoes, but I had a couple questions on some updates on shoes. So I went ahead and bought these shoes. Now these shoes they're made by Solomon, and I used to have a Solomon snowboard, Solomon binding, Solomon boots for snowboarding, all that when I was a kid. But now I guess they're going out into hiking and stuff. So I pulled it up on my phone. They're called the Tundra Pro Clima Solomon waterproof boot. They're not meant for hunting, but they have a rating of -40 when you're moving, and then -20 when you're kind of sitting still. Um, I don't know anything other than that. That's all I can tell you right now. But they claim that this thing here, it's called Aerotherm, and it was made by astronauts. The insulation. So I don't know, but I did wear them yesterday. They came in the mail, and they're super comfortable. They feel warm, but um,
They're
well,
asbestos. You got asbestos boots.
no. So they're very stiff. Like I can't bend them, and I had really good like ankle support. So I feel like they would be good for hunting. Now this guy doesn't hunt, but he's in this blizzard conditions, -60, 40, and all that. So and they are Gore-Tex waterproof. That's all I know. So I'm gonna wear these things and put them to the test and let you guys know how they work out. I'm hoping my feet stay warm because I'm tired of cold toes when I go hunting.
Yeah. Yeah, that
That's
would.
all I got on that.
Well, hopefully that's a great find, and it could be recommended to others because everybody suffers from
They
cold
do.
toes.
And they're not talked about in the hunting world. So I don't know what the outcome is going to be. So I wear a 10.5, but I bought an 11. That way I can puff up on socks or whatever. But I don't know. We'll see what happens.
Bigfoot.
Bigfoot.
So
Chris, it
today,
it's a happy new year.
Oh, that is true. This is
2025.
2025. This is January 1st, the
Yeah, so
morning
it's
of Happy New Year.
it's the third season of
Hmm.
recording podcasts. So it'll be the third. We're going into the third year right now. It's
Yes.
episode 106, and
Yes.
it's technically podcast one of season three, but we
Yeah.
continue with the actual numbers total. So
Right.
pretty cool. 2 years in the books already,
Two
and
years running.
going to a third year.
Number one on Spotify, right?
Not yet. Not yet. Not yet on Spotify. Uh, maybe next year. Maybe 2026.
Yeah, we'll hit that mark.
Yeah,
Mm.
one day.
So
So
yeah,
what's today? So
so
what's up with today?
so today's topic, we touched a little bit on TSI stuff last podcast, and you're going into consulting type season now, up and
Hmm.
coming,
Hmm.
and sometimes you will get on a piece of property and they'll say, "Hey, I already had somebody come out and look, this is what happened." So today we're going to talk about what's the consequences of having a bad TSI job.
Ooh.
You know, it it obviously, some of the stuff can be fixed, but it's a bang up job to try to clean up after somebody's done something like that. And
Hmm.
if it's not what you wanted, or if it was just a bad botched job.
Yeah.
But tell us what you've seen, what you're expecting to see. Um,
So I do get to see a lot of failures because going to certain properties and just hunting, for 25 years, you see different things. So I have the experience of being able to talk about this. Um, a lot of times when I go to a piece of property, some guys, landowners, they will attempt to start cutting trees, or they have already hired like a forester or something that came in and they did like some kind of select cut. But the problem is that type of stuff is different from wildlife. When you look at the differences is like a forester and thing, you have a forestry management plan and all this stuff. They're focusing on dollars. What can we cut to produce the most dollars in the next 5, 10, 15 years? When is the next cut going to be? So that's how they look at that. Wildlife value is very different because you're looking at regeneration, you know?
in the here and
And
now, you want almost
yes,
instant results.
right, yep. And there's so many variances when it goes into it because if you watch some guys, like for instance, I'll throw out some people here. If you look at Grant Woods, his main goal was hack and squirt. He doesn't want those logs on the ground because he does a lot of burns. So, and he's in an area where I don't quite understand why. I don't understand really everything he does, but if he hacks and squirts a tree, it kills the tree standing. Now, I'm
Mhm.
for hack and squirt. I like the idea. I do it myself, but he constantly burns. So when you burn, he wants that green regrowth because he likes, the savanna type look and stuff, and you get all that green vegetation.
Yeah.
But and he has no logs on the ground. So when you do that type of thing, you're setting back the woody browse regeneration,
Hmm.
which I understand because, if you clear cut an area or select cut an area, that regeneration, the woody browse part of it, can really overtake an area, in 5, 10 years. Like it's going to be so thick that deer won't use it. I get that aspect as well. Then you have other guys that will flush cut trees and then they will treat the stumps,
Hmm.
right? Because they don't want the stumps resprouting. Because
Yeah.
then 5, 10 years, that's going to be a disaster.
Hmm.
So either method that you look at, there's always going to be some kind of cleanup work to do. And
Maintenance type.
me, yeah, maintenance type, exactly. So anytime we said this before, but anytime you start cutting, you open up a can of worms because
Hmm.
there's always going to be some kind of work that needs to be done.
Hmm.
So what am I getting at? So I enjoy or believe in all the methods of TSI. Now, timber stand improvement, I guess the term can be thrown around in different ways, but
Yeah.
Generally, TSI would be, you're improving the timber air you're then on that spot on your land to allow for, I guess, boards per foot. How much money can we make? We're taking out the undesirables and allowing the money trees to flourish. So TSI on a deer wildlife habitat is different because you want those logs on the ground. You want this is just me. You want the logs on the ground. I want the sprouts coming up off the trees, right? I want, if it's necessary, I want the hinge cut because I want the sprouts. I want the the complete flush cut of a tree, but to put the log on the ground. So I made a video about this the other day, but I am for all of those techniques. The problem is when the bad part you can get to is if you hire a timber company, a forester to come in there, they're going to annihilate your woods and leave it a mess. The tops are going to be everywhere. It is going to be
Yeah.
a mess that you have
Skidder is gonna rut it all up.
everywhere.
Yeah.
Um, and not only those tops, but most times they're going to select cut your entire property. So now, if you have 50 acres, you just select cut that entire 50 acres. So now that entire 50 acres is a mess. So what does that mean? It means that now that entire 50 acres is the same across those 50 acres. So then as a deer hunter, where do you hunt?
Yeah.
Because if everything is the same in that 50 acres, where do you hunt? If it's a
Mm,
solid chunk of woods, it's all the same.
mhm.
So with a wildlife aspect, it's a little bit different because you want, say, cutting over here and then have a food plot over here or have a food plot back in the backside and pull them in and whatever. But you want differences within that area. You don't want everything the same. You want different habitat features within.
Yeah.
Maybe you have 3 acres that you want to cut because you just kind of want to, if a deer's within the area, he finds it and he beds there, and then maybe you get lucky where he leaves that bed and goes to a food plot, that you have.
I
So,
mean, and it's ironic that you just said that because this year, uh, there's a chunk of land that the in-laws own
mhm,
that's only 3 acres, and it's across the road from my destination plots.
mhm,
And the last time it snowed, I went over there for a walk. Now, the father-in-law had it all timbered out, and they left it a mess. And there is no rhyme or reason on which direction that the deer travel through it because the only thing they can do is weasel their way through all that garbage,
right,
So there's no really good uh, uh, travel corridors, if you would, through there.
mhm, yep,
So they're basically skirting on the edges of the property. And I mean, now and then you'd find one track that would go through, and yeah, and it just there's just no good way through there. So anyhow, the place has been untouched for years, and as far as I know, nobody should be in there. But I told my boy that I think this year we're gonna make it a goal to go in there, and what I want to do is, and I'm gonna do it in reverse, like according to what other people might think. What I'm gonna do is, since everything is the same, like you're talking, I'm gonna go in and find the best looking tree with some background cover or something. It's probably going to be a pine tree or something, that will hide my figure, and I will build a corridor around that idea.
mhm,
So I'm gonna find the best tree, and I'm gonna cut a travel corridor and bring it past that tree.
mhm,
And what they do is they come out of the timber, the adjoining timber, and they come through that 3 acres, and the farmer fields is right there, Ed's.
mhm,
So the field is there, and that's what they're doing. They're crisscrossing his field. So they come through that little 3 acre plot. And I told the boy, I said, this year I'm going to make it a goal that, that's going to be another option for us to have a stand. So I'm going to do it that way. I'm going to pick the tree, and then I'm going to cut a nice path so that they have ease of walking, And that is another thing, like you're talking about right now with all that mess, and that's the way that is over there. So I just
Mhm.
wanted to add that. I mean, just
Yeah,
another option into the equation.
yeah. I mean, the biggest part is getting to cut. But then when you do cut, I feel like the consequence of that is it being too thick because a
Mhm.
deer, is going to take the path of least resistance when it's walking.
Right.
When it maneuvers around the landscape, it wants to go through the path of least resistance. If
Mhm.
it's all clouded up with junk when he's
Yes.
trying to move, he'll just avoid the area.
Yeah.
Now, yeah, he wants that thick stuff to bed, but
Right.
first of all, how does he get there if it's too thick? And then
Right.
how does he maneuver through all that junk if it's too thick? So, yeah, it's good to have that mess on the ground for cover and things, birds, rat, whatever it is, but you have to have that cleanup done. So, really, the most important part of all this, of when you do, if you want to call it a TSI, is the cleanup. You know, me, when I do it, I like to do it, is I use all of the methods: hinge cut, hack and squirt, and flush cut. If I start flush cutting trees just to open up the canopy and it starts to get too thick, then you may hack and squirt a tree. Now the tree is going to die to allow the more sunlight, but you're not clouding up the floor.
Yeah.
And then if you need to hinge cut certain areas, I like the hinge cut idea because you can actually use it to direct deer flow. If you cloud up an area behind your stand, it prevents deer from going behind you, and you can kind of direct them out in front of you. Um, there's so many things to do, but it can have major consequences, because another one is when you hire somebody in to do it, if they only take out, say, 30% of the canopy, you just paid this, whoever it is, you paid them to take out 30% of the canopy, but now you still don't have no regeneration because you didn't open up the canopy enough.
Mhm.
So you just wasted your money on only taking out 30%. The ideal would probably be, 50, 60, 70%. So you actually get the sunlight to the ground to allow the regeneration.
Yeah.
So
Well,
there's
I
just,
mean, somebody's going to say, "Well, 30% is better than none."
it
Yeah,
is, it is.
sure it is, but
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
not the ultimate goal, I guess.
Right. Yeah.
And some of the consequences, like you said, is the flow and just clogging it up. You
Hmm.
know,
Yeah.
uh, and then with all that garbage on the ground, you don't get the proper regeneration that you'd want. The deer aren't going to crawl through them tops and pick and choose what they want to eat. They're like you
Hmm.
said, they're going to go around it and go the path of least resistance. Now, if
Hmm.
they would happen to hop, skip, and a jump and get in there, well, yeah, they'll have a heyday if there's something growing in between. Something might get in there and start bedding down, and
Hmm.
I mean, so it's not totally impossible,
Yeah.
uh, but yeah, the majority of them though are going to skirt it.
Yep. Well, another thing to think about too is some guys will say, "Oh, well, I want it massively thick, the deer hide in there." Well, yeah, when they're being shot at and they're under massive distress, they'll go in there and just hide out.
Right. Yeah.
But on a normal day for a deer, most of the times it's probably not going to go in there. It's
Yeah.
going to
Well,
skirt the edge,
how
you
do you
know?
hunt? How do you hunt it if
Right.
that's if it's just a hole up, you know,
Right.
a place to bed?
Right. They're just going to skirt the edge around it. Now,
You're
if
gonna have
I'm
to hunt the edge then too, because
right,
you're not gonna be
exactly.
able to get in on it.
Right. So there's a lot of mishaps that can happen with this. And, this time of year, I'm getting a lot of calls. And if you do call, I'm not just showing up at your property to start cutting. Like, I had this guy call the other day. I think I think it was his name was Doug. I'm actually going to his property to visit it first. He already has a plan in place and everything, but he wants a certain area cut, and that's perfectly fine. But I said, look, I'm not just going to show up just to cut. I need to see it first. I'm not going to
Mhm.
waste the time because you're going to pay me to come out for whatever it takes. I need to go there first, mark trees, figure out a plan what to cut, then I'll come back and cut. I'm not going to, if you just pay somebody to come out there like the very first day without inspecting it. I mean, yeah, you can do it, but you're kind of, the guy's close enough to where I can do that. But you're going to waste half a day of looking at things before you start cutting. So I
Yeah,
wanted the guy to get a full day's work of cutting. If it's going, we're going to take more than a day, but I wanted to get a full, work day, cutting, not half a day looking around trying to, figure out a plan and then half a day cut. So he's close enough to where I told him, I was like, look, man, I'll make a deal with you. If you hire me to do the job, I'll come out and inspect it, for free. I'll come out and look at it. That way, when we come back, I have an idea, and that way I can give you a better idea on if it's is it going to take 2 days, 3 days. I don't know.
you're right.
So, and then we can come up with a plan.
Yeah,
So
luckily he's close enough for you.
yeah, he's close enough to where I can, I told him I'd hook him up. So I talked to
Yeah.
him on the phone and everything. So nice guy. But I had another call later that night about the same thing, and another call from a guy in Elkton. So there's a lot of stuff that's going on with this, and a lot of people are getting into these cuttings because they realize that you can't just have a piece of woods that you can see wide open in. If you can see
Right.
straight through the forest, there's no regrowth. So one, the deer are just going to pass through it. It's not going to slow them down. You want that regrowth to where a deer actually comes in there, eats a little bit, goes over here, eats a little bit. You're slowing them down to so they spend more time on your property, which is going to give the hunter, more chances,
More opportunity.
potentially more
Yeah.
opportunity to shoot the deer if it spends more time on it. So that's the whole goal. Um, but yeah, there's a property that they did a really heavy select cut on out past the island where I go hunting at.
Hmm.
And if you ride past it, I mean, it looks like a bomb went off, and it looks so bad. And I don't know. And I know people hunt there, so I don't know if it's a landowner or if he leases that or whatever. But whoever hunts that now, I mean, they're in a mess. I mean, it literally looks like a bomb went off.
Right.
Ruts. I mean, ruts, foot deep. 2, 3 deep, foot deep, and just tops everywhere and logs, and you can't even walk through it.
Yeah, that's the way this 3 acres is, and like I said, I went over and was checking all the prints that I could find, and I literally couldn't even walk through it. I was had to go around all the tops and things and trying to follow the deer tracks, and they weren't that hard to follow, to be honest, because they took the easiest routes, and I was kind of
Hmm.
glad of that because
Yeah.
I was trying to follow them, and uh, there's already a few small trails on the edges, but like I said, I want to pick a good ambush spot and cut a trail to me so that they have to travel freely past me and give me an opportunity. So
Hmm.
I thought that would be a good idea for that once it's already been botched. I mean, it's been cut, I don't know how many years. It was probably cut 10 years ago. And the stuff has not rotted enough to come down flat. It's still everything's all still sticking up in the air, and I think the one neighbor in the summertime's cutting firewood off of it and that type of thing, and so it's a mess.
Hmm.
But I want
Well,
to make it usable. I mean, it's just
yeah.
a piece of property there she's paying taxes on, and no one uses it.
Hmm. Yeah.
I
I mean,
thought at least I could hunt it.
it's okay to make a mess. Just realize the cleanup aspect. You're gonna have to rent a skid steer with some tracks on it for a few days to push stuff out the way, or and you and your couple buddies with some chainsaws to cut pass through it.
Yeah,
Now, there would be a scenario where you could say you hard cut an edge. It's because you're blocking that side of the property to where maybe trespass, whatever, you're just blocking it from neighbors, and then you're going to force the deer to come out a pinch point that you create into your property. So you're
mm,
forcing the deer to go in one way. So there's lots of things you can do, but
mm,
I think the worst thing you could do would be from a deer standpoint is to select cut your entire property. You don't want to do that. Now, if you're doing it for money, then that's different. But if you want straight habitat stuff, you don't want to select cut the entire property. You want to select cut certain areas and create habitat features and differences within that 40 acres. So if you have 40 acres, maybe you're select cutting 10 acres, 5 acres. to create some bedding and cover for regeneration. Then you're creating some pinch points and travel routes, and then you have maybe 2 acres, a food plot, whether it's 2 or 3 half-acre plots, or you know 2 1-acre plots, whatever it is. But you're creating differences within. You're not
Mm,
making the entire property different, because you, at the end of the day, you still have to have time to move around. If everything's the same, the deer could be anywhere. So then if the deer are anywhere, how do you get around the property without spooking them?
yeah.
So you have to have areas around the edges to maneuver, you
Hmm.
know, in non-deer area. I mean, it's just, there's a lot can go wrong. You can make
Yeah,
it you can make it worse.
and your entry and exit's going to be screwy.
Mhm.
If you don't go about it right, like this piece over here, it's on the edge of a field, so it's probably not going to be a morning stand. It's going to
Mhm.
be an evening stand when you're going to catch them coming out of the timber and headed for the fields. You
Mhm.
know, so I mean, there's some other things you have to think about when you do that. Where at on your property are you going to do these improvements, and
Right.
how is it going to affect your entry and exit?
Mhm. Yeah,
Yeah,
what's the most common wind direction, you know?
you're
Where
right.
do you want the deer to be, to where you can catch them coming out and you have a good wind to hunt, and um so forth. So there's a lot going on with it, and not only that, it's dangerous, but to do it, if you're for yourself, and people, you can do it, you're for yourself, but
Yeah,
you just have a plan in place, use common sense with it. Where can I put these deer at, and where can I hunt them at? If I put them in the backside of the property, I can funnel them through my property to a
yeah,
food source,
right.
you
And
know?
that's the scenario I'm in.
Yeah.
It's all, and the I guess a good thing about it is it's already done.
Mhm.
Now, now it's up to me though
You're
to
just on the
clean.
cleanup.
Yeah, I'll have to do the cleanup and all the work, but I can, like I said, I can just go through and cut a 3-foot swath, make a trail, and they will walk it.
Oh, yeah.
And
Yeah,
there's enough
100%.
canopy missing that I could actually plant like a no BS on it or something, or a hot chick or something, from domain, and I could get a trail going that they would follow. I could probably get away with that back there.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah,
but yeah, I mean, there is consequences to everything that you do,
everything.
and hopefully you're not having to clean up someone else's mess to make your spot huntable like I'm going to have to do. But if you get somebody in there that's competent and you get a good plan going and you know what you want, and the two of you could put your heads together and make a great plan and make it so that it's working in your favor, not against you.
Yeah, the last thing I'll say, and then we'll wrap it up, is, in my YouTube video the other day, um, I mentioned that, you know, all these techniques have a time and place for them. But don't pick one of the techniques just because your favorite YouTuber is using it.
Hmm.
You have to be careful. Just because this guy over here is hinge cutting doesn't mean you have to hinge cut on your property. I
Hmm.
understand you like the guy, you follow him and all that. That's fine, but it doesn't mean that that technique is right for your property. Just
Right.
because this guy is hacking squirting doesn't mean you have to do that on your property. I think you should have an open mindset and use all of the available techniques, and use them in ways that make sense, common
Hmm.
sense.
Hmm.
You know, forget, watch people, see what they do and how each one can benefit you. But when you're looking at your property, have an open mindset and use all of those techniques. And I think you'll have better results.
Right. Right.
That's all I got.
And and then too, they have to be careful. Like in an example, when we did that plot clearing, that plot expansion at the old property
Mm,
that we did, and we took out like an acre of woods, and we had to be careful where we piled all the debris to
hmm
make sure that we weren't blocking the deer's entrance into the plots and things.
hmm
So I mean, a lot of factors do come in, and you have to think ahead about it.
Yeah, well, you can use the logs to your advantage too, like we did.
Yeah.
We drug them and pile it up in front of the sad daddy so you can walk to it without them seeing you.
Yeah.
You can block certain trails off to force them to go another way. So
Right.
you can use it to your advantage, but it can
Yeah.
also,
Got to think about it.
if it's bad, it's bad. It's gonna
Yeah.
have consequences.
Yep. Episode 106. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, 2025.
5.